Hello, folks. This is Chris, KY4CKP, the Four Low Ham. Well, my wife and I went on another adventure with Sam Justice of Justice Explorers, taking off from Callie's campground and heading out on probably most of, if not the same trails that he went out on a couple of weeks prior to this. There's Sam's green Jeep there. And the big difference, though, is that it was extremely dusty 2 weeks ago when we hit these trails. And they are designed to be beginner friendly, stock vehicle friendly, and they're not terribly difficult. Just gives folks an opportunity to get a little bit off road and rough gravel road and do some creek crossings and even drive in creeks a little bit and hit some mud puddles and those kinds of things. If you're newer to off-roading, if you're interested in off-roading, but you're not sure how hardcore you want to get about it, but you've got a good vehicle. Jeeps and Forerunners and Tacomas and these kinds of vehicles are all really very capable from the factory, typically. So that's the position my wife and I are in. We have vehicles and we've done a few things to them. They're not stock anymore, but we are still pretty new to off-roading, and so we want to build up our experience and our confidence level in ourselves and understanding trails and understanding how to tackle different kinds of the characteristics of trails. Knowing that our vehicles are very, very capable, so we want to educate ourselves and match the ability of our vehicles. A lot of times people look at our vehicles and they go, oh yeah, you could do X, Y, or Z. And they just don't realize that as drivers, we're not ready for X, Y, or Z. We're ready for A, B, C. But we're trying to work on that. And going out on these beginner trail rides with Sam is part of our efforts to do that and have a good time, and enjoy it and not have high stress levels. Because if you're new to this stuff but you're interested in it, you would like to be able to get a feel for it without really having to worry about damage to your vehicle and that kind of stuff. Because for a lot of us, these are daily drivers. Sometimes they're relatively new or brand new vehicles, and you don't want to do a bunch of damage when you're not even sure how much you really are going to be into an activity or a hobby like off-roading. So we headed out today. I think it was the same trails, most of the same trails we had done again 2 weeks earlier, but it was the big difference this time is how much wetter it was. If you saw the previous video, and I cut out a bunch of just how dusty the trails were. I mean, we were out for 3 or 4 hours, so I don't try to show all that anyway, but there were parts on some of the gravel roads where it was so dusty, you literally could hardly see 10 feet in front of your vehicle. I mean, it was unbelievable how dusty they were. And trails like Fixer Lico, if you watch the video where I lost my Tacoma, that's so far in my experience, the mud puddles and things were far deeper on that day than I've seen them since. And it hadn't rained that much for several days to almost a week before we went out that day. But when we went out with Sam 2 weeks prior to this video that you're watching now, super dry. Most of the mud puddles on Fixer were gone, or a couple of inches deep instead of 6 or 8 inches deep, that kind of thing. Some stuff, was 14 inches, that day last year when I had gone on and lost the truck. So it's just really interesting. And then this day, there has been some recent rain, and it even rains and quite hard for a while on us this day. So the trails were all wet, and lots of relatively small mud puddles, a couple of deeper ones, but the creek crossings still weren't very bad. That's one thing that sort of kind of impressed me was that there had been some local rain. You can see every time you see the creeks when we're crossing or by the creeks, you see how brown they are, how muddy they are. There's been some rain fairly recently, and then again on this day it rained some more about the last third before we were winding things up and then headed out for a late lunch. But the puddles weren't that bad. The creeks weren't that bad. They're up a little bit, and so it really didn't affect the severity of running the creeks and running the trails this day. But it did give things a little different feel to them than the way it was 2 weeks earlier. So even though it's the same or several of the same trails that we had hit 2 weeks earlier, especially being that my wife and I are still pretty new and everything, uh, it almost felt like a different experience. So it was still lots of fun to get out. Again, she and I are new, even though we have very capable vehicles, like a lot of people do, especially with Jeeps and things. But as the driver, you want to build up your confidence and your understanding. How should I tackle this obstacle? I know the vehicle can do it, but I need to give the vehicle some instructions, right? So it's good to get out there and just get some practice, get some experience, get used to your vehicle being off camber and going up steep hills and steep declines and fairly deep water and stuff. It's pretty disconcerting when you're new to some of that stuff. But then when you realize, well, really 80 inches of water is really no big deal. You start getting noticeably higher than that, depending on your vehicle, it makes more of a difference. But 4, 6, 8 inches is really not that big a deal. So here we're getting to go along the creek a little bit. Again, it's up a little bit from 2 weeks prior, and it's a lot muddier. If you saw the first video I did when we went out with Sam, the water was definitely a whole lot cleaner. And now everything's very, very muddy. And the soil in this area, it's kind of weird because in Kentucky we have a lot of agriculture, we have a lot of farming, but as you get more here towards the central eastern side, getting closer to and into the Appalachian Mountains, you get into a lot more sandy soil, and so that's why a lot of it is so light brown. And it's been kind of funny. I bought this second Tacoma. Used. I bought the first one used as well. And when you're buying a used vehicle, you look around, but you're at the mercy of the market, right? You may be interested in certain colors or something, but if you find what you want and it's a good deal, then you may just have to take kind of whatever color is available. So that's what happened. I found the first Tacoma, which was the gray one, but then I found this one, and this one happened to be the quicksand color. Well, it's a real good match for the mud that's in this part of Kentucky. The sandy mud is pretty close, especially when it dries. When we got back from the trail rides for the spring Daniel Boone Back the Byway event, the mud on my truck was really close to the same color as the paint. You could, if you just sort of glanced at my truck, you would almost not even know it had a bunch of mud all over it. So kind of lucky, kind of fortunate, in that regard. So yeah, we with these easier trails that Sam does, and again, my wife and I really appreciate that there's somebody like Sam who is willing to donate their time and effort to do these easy trail rides. He tries to do 1 or 2 of these a month, and there's a lot of variables in there with weather and schedules and all kinds of things, but he tries to do 1 or 2 of these a month to let folks get their vehicles and get out there and see what they think about all this, and are they going to enjoy it? And these are easier trails. They're wider trails. You're not going to get much, if any, pinstriping. You can see how wide these trails are in general. Now, the trails we ended up being on for the Daniel Boone Back to Byway event, let's just say there were some pinstripes. and they pretty much told you're guaranteed to get some pinstripes on these trails. So if you're got a newer vehicle, you're concerned about your paint, then either pick some different trails or stay at camp, because there's only so much you can do when the vegetation grows in. But these are all pretty nice trails. They're pretty wide, and very little, if any, pinstriping. Nothing serious at all. So, and that's the point, right? Is that they're stock friendly for vehicles and for new riders and drivers and things. So we had another good time. We had a good time the first time with Sam. Sam Justice. He has Justice Explorers. You can find him on Facebook, and again, he advertises when he's going to do these rides, and so you can check him out. And if you're in this area, or if you're going to be in this area, and you'd like to hit some of the trails and And if you get with Sam, again, depending on his schedule and everything, he may even be able to, if you want more moderate to harder trails, I'm sure he can certainly point you in those directions because his Jeep, he does that kind of stuff all the time. He does and leads trail rides for a number of big events. He's got lots of experience with that stuff, and his Jeep is extremely capable. We had several stock vehicles this day. In fact, the Gladiator that was right behind Sam, kind of the not quite the same color as my Tacoma, but sort of that similar sort of a tan color, was in fact brand new. I think it had less than 500 miles on it or something, and the guy who owned that truck, he was a little nervous. He wanted to get out and do some off-roading, but his truck was new, and he was kind of newer to this area, if I remember correctly. And he was a little bit concerned. And I think both these two Jeeps ahead of me were also not necessarily new, but these were, one couple was from California, I think, and they had done a fair amount of off-roading in California, but they were a little bit newer to this part of the country. And I think the other couple, they were just a little bit newer to off-roading. So. And they were, I think, stock Jeeps. I mean, a stock Jeep typically is pretty capable. So, I mean, that only says so much in a way. But yeah, we all came out, had a good time. My wife was in her 4Runner, and there's that Gladiator. You can see it's not quite the same color as my Tacoma, but sort of in that family. Again, a good color as far as the mud in this area if you don't want to show it off. So here's that one bridge. You might remember it from the first video, and I forget which trail this is on. I haven't learned all these trails that well yet. But Sam always stops. It's a good stopping point because it's a little bit of a wide spot. You can usually kind of stop and not completely block everything. But also, and this is of course an excellent an idea. But Sam always wants to get out and actually get down there and walk on that bridge and give it a close inspection. Because it's not really maintained, and he's always so far he's always stopped and gotten out and looked at the state of the wood and the big heavy nail spikes they use to kind of put it together. Make sure nothing's sticking out, nothing should puncture a tire, and that it's safe to take some vehicles across it. So the previous trip and then this trip it was in about the same shape and was fine for vehicles to go across. But you just don't want to take things like this for granted because, again, most of these roads are really not maintained, at least not anymore. Some of them were county roads and maybe technically are still on the books as county roads, but there is blacktop, and we do have blacktop around in Kentucky, and so these really old county roads, they just don't get very much of any maintenance. So that bridge it's a best effort kind of a thing there. So we all got through this. We all got across the bridge. It's a little bit challenging because you sort of take that hard from this direction. At least you take a hard left-hand turn, go down the hill, cross the bridge, and then you got to take a hard immediate left-hand turn to start coming out on this part of the trail. And of course, if you're going the other direction, you're coming down this point, you got to take a hard right-hand turn and then another hard right-hand turn. So that's what makes it just a little bit more challenging, but again, it's not really too big a deal. Now here you can see where it had started to pick up and start raining, and so we're probably 2/3 through the overall ride at this point, something like that, and it finally started to rain, and rained hard. It rained real hard for a while. I didn't show very much of that because it's not going to be a whole lot of fun to just watch my windshield wipers going back and forth constantly. And it got water drops on my rear camera too, so I didn't show as much of the footage once it had rained from that one. But we got a little more footage coming up here before we start heading out, and then went to a barbecue restaurant. We'll see that here a little bit towards the end, and had a late lunch and had some barbecue. But here we're kind of on the back nine and still going to hit some puddles and a couple of creek crossings and that kind of stuff. But even though it had started raining again here, and again it rained for hard, at least half an hour, maybe closer to 45 minutes. and then just rained medium to soft after that. But again, it didn't really disturb the trails too much. We still hit a couple of creek crossings and things, and nothing was was flooded or problematic really in any way. Everything was very very dirty and muddy. Again, all the water, a lot of the stuff, the creeks especially when you come through there, if it hasn't rained that much lately, they're pretty clear. But as we've seen, everything's just really sort of that same shade of brown. And here it's looks like the rains has started to ease up again. Again, this was a little bit later after it had rained for quite a while. So coming on out, and so again, if you're in the sort of central eastern Kentucky area, my wife and I live in Lexington, so it takes us about an hour to get out to Callie's campground. You can find Callie's on the web in the Natural Gorge area, if you know that, or you can look up that whole area. There's all kinds of camping and hiking and fishing and all kinds of stuff in this area, and there's lots of trails. And there's plenty of medium and hard trails. If you're already in that position, you want some medium to hard challenges. There are plenty of those in this area, but we do have some of these easier ones for folks that are just starting out. And you can find Sam on Facebook, Justice Explorers, or just look up Sam Justice, and you can find him. And he plans these rides every so often. Again, he tries to do one or two a month, but you can always contact him, and if he's got time, he can potentially meet up with folks and do stuff, especially if you're interested in stuff that's a little bit more moderate to maybe even hard. So yeah, we're coming on out. Got just a few more creeks, a few more puddles and things as we're again beginning to head on the end of this one and head out to lunch. And as we'll see, sort of in the final segment, we actually met up on a special guest on the trails. Of course, occasionally you're gonna pass people. We've passed side by sides and other occasional trucks and things. But on this particular day, we passed somebody that Sam knew, and I knew of by reputation because they also run a YouTube channel, and so we'll see them coming up here in just a few minutes. But here we're working our way on out. Again, had a good time, even though it rained some. Wasn't really a big deal. It just kept it a little bit cooler and kept that dust down, which it wasn't a bad thing. So decent creeks. So again, these are decent rides. So again, highly recommend the area for all kinds of outdoor activities, but kayaking and all kinds of things. But for off-roading, again, there's the entire Kentucky Adventure Trail, Kentucky Adventure Tour. There's that system. You can look that one up, the KAT. The Daniel Boone Backcountry Byway is hundreds of miles trail, so there is a lot of off-roading opportunities here, and especially in the more eastern part of Kentucky. So we're coming on out of this one, and then we'll meet up with our special visitor here in just a little while. So yeah, everything was really muddy, but nothing was that deep, so nothing to be too concerned about. Again, if you're a little bit newer, like my wife and I, this was right about our speed for right now, and we'll probably be graduating to somewhat more moderate stuff here before too long, but we want to match what our vehicles are capable of. So we're going to wrap up this sort of big first section, and then we'll bring you back, your folks back here in the final section, and wrap up the video here in just another couple of minutes. So we'll bring you folks right back. All right, folks, as we were kind of heading into the home stretch on the trails this day, and the rain was finally beginning to let up after, as we saw, it had rained pretty hard there for a little while. We came across a Jeep coming down the trail in the opposite direction. You can kind of see there a blue Jeep, and it was somebody that Sam knew and somebody I happen to know by reputation, the people from Nature's Glory Cabin. If you haven't checked out their YouTube channel, be sure and do so. He's got a lot of great videos from the trails in this general area, so I don't know if he was filming this day, but it was kind of cool to see somebody out on the trails that I've seen quite a few of his videos. So be sure and check out their channel. And then we went on and started kind of heading out. Again, the rain was finally starting to let up. I was pretty amazed at how wet the trails were, as we said earlier, and that it wasn't too bad, even for the last, probably not half, maybe 1/3 of the day here. That the rain, even though it was quite hard for a while there, the trails really didn't get too bad. They were definitely damp and wet, and it was sort of nice not having all the dust that we had the previous trip out just a couple of weeks before this. But it was nice to get out there. But it was nice that not any of the mud puddles that we hit there in the final section, or the creeks or anything were too bad. They weren't too high. But again, these are easy trails rated for beginners and stock friendly vehicles, basically. And we had a couple of stock Jeeps there. I think that blue Jeep right in front of me was fairly stock, and I think even the Jeep in front of that was fairly stock. And we also had the truck, the Jeep truck as well. That was brand new. I think it only had a few hundred miles on it, maybe even less, and was totally stock. Of course, these are all great and highly capable vehicles, especially once you've maybe done just a few things to them. So here we are, just kind of basically heading out at this point, heading back towards the upper sections of the trails, as you've seen. And if you go out on trails yourself, you know that we spend a lot of time here in the East Coast, in the bottom of valleys, crawling along a lot of the creeks and things. Of course, you'll hit some of the tops of the ridges from time to time as well. So here we're just kind of on the way out, and since this was sort of wrapping up the day, Sam usually, I guess, invites people to go have lunch, kind of a late lunch, and so we went out to someplace that my wife and I had never been to in this area, Red Point Barbecue. You can look them up. We've got a webpage and Facebook and everything, Red Point Barbecue, and a nice little spot sort of out in the country there, and pretty close to this gorge area where these trails are. And so that's where we all just headed out that way. I think all or most of us that were on the group that day, and had some barbecue and had some good brisket and some good pork belly, and I think my wife got the blackened catfish, and they've got chicken and some other things as well. So that kind of wraps this one up. We had a great day, even though it did rain about a third of the day, maybe a little more, and pretty hard at times. It still wasn't bad, and the fact that the trails were a lot wetter, it didn't really affect our ability to get through them to any degree. Again, these are fairly easy trails, but it wasn't anything we had to be too worried about. So check out Sam Justice, and this is Chris the Four Low Ham. We'll see you folks down the road in the next video.